Thank you.
Yeah, the last meeting, one of the reasons I wanted to change the format here is the last meeting meandered on for 3.5 hours. And a lot of it wasn't really about the book. It was more, ended up my doing psychotherapy for a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Unintentionally. And I ended up kind of knackered, as Sarah might say.
Yeah.
And so.
Knackered.
Knackered.
Knackered. You have to say with a northern, that's it, northern.
I'm so sorry. I grew up in New York, and there we say our R's. We pronounce it.
Yeah. I visited New York once. I had the pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me kick this thing off. Hi, everyone. This is the 10,000 Things Zoom for July 7th, 2018. I'm Robert Altsman, the author of the book, The 10,000 Things, and we've gathered here today to discuss that book with readers. And the readers here are Sarah Duff and Neville Campbell, Sterling Doughty, Danny Antivalidis.
Yeah.
Well done, Robert. Antivalidis and Richard McGraw. So let's begin. If there are any questions or discussion of the book, I'd be happy to hear it.
Okay, so Robert, I would like to ask you particularly about magical thinking. I was adopted as a young baby, and my natural and biological mother, seeing as I grew older, I found out they both mirrored each other's pathway. So when you, with your reference to the nature and nurture, what I've observed and found out and witnessed firsthand is that they both had struggles with alcohol and suicide, and was both of the second twin to be born. And this aspect of something being encoded in the body resonates with me, because I don't feel as though, I feel there is a nature of, nature and the nurture aspect of it, but actually it's not perhaps magical thinking, more about a magical happening, something that's already predisposed, that's already set. Does that make sense? Just something that I've witnessed myself and have direct experience of.
Well, Sarah, let me tell you what I mean by magical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I use that term to mean treating beliefs as if they were facts.
Right.
And when people do that routinely, that leads to a kind of self-hypnosis. Because the more something is repeated, whether it's true or not, the more it is believed. This is a psychological principle. And even people who try to manipulate others end up believing whatever they say. This is just the way that the mind works. And so what I mean by magical thinking is talking about the absolute, for example, or non-duality, or self-realization, or karma, or causality, as if someone really understood anything about all that. But we don't know anything about those things. We've heard about them at some point. The example that I used in the chapter in the book was astrology. Now, astrology has been tested really carefully. I gave some of the references for that. Mm-hmm. And it has absolutely no predictive value whatsoever. None. Not that it only has a slight predictive value or some predictive value. It has none at all. No more.
So it's perfect.
It's perfectly random. That's right.
Right.
It's just like flipping a coin. And so anyone who considers that astrology has anything to say at all is engaged in magical thinking. And I think that's a really good example, because if you confront someone about astrology and say what I am saying now, they will absolutely not believe you. They are hypnotized. They just cannot allow themselves to imagine that there's nothing to it, and it's just nonsense. The reason that the concept of magical thinking is so important is that if we don't see that in ourselves, we're all subject to it. I'm not pointing the finger. We're all subject to magical thinking. If we can't recognize our own magical thinking, we can never actually arrive at what I call an awakened mind or awakened state, because there will always be this hypnotic trance that we've got running in the background, lifting things away. Other examples of magical thinking are God, for example. I'm not saying there is no God. I'm saying there's no evidence for it. And so when someone believes in God, that person is just engaged in self-hypnosis, has heard about God from childhood, and now that takes on some kind of reality when actually we know nothing about it.
Exactly. Thank you. And for me, from my own story, from a child, you know, we're indoctrined into, you go to church, you go to Sunday school, you get Easter clothes, you believe in something outside of you, that God sits on a cloud and he's got a white beard and you've got to be good and you've got to do this. And then for me, when I, as you grow old and had my own children, and I planted my conditioning and ingrained into them, and then went into primary school teaching, and then I got sick and tired of conditioning these young minds with this dogma. But then when I went on the spiritual path, I was replacing reality with something else, with the spiritual concept, whether it was, I don't know, some form of meditation, a practice, or whether it was tantra or something else. And it's this book dropped in my lap, and I was like, what have I been doing?
When people have received this kind of dogmatic religious programming as children, some of them just keep that dogma for the rest of their lives. But there's a more subtle kind of magical thinking that I see involved in this process, which is someone will say, well, God, of course, is not this bearded. I think that might be better. Alfred's got a wild household going on there, apparently. There's monsters and a child and every other thing. So what happens is, if someone has received this kind of dogmatic religious upbringing, some people do stick with that for their entire lives, but others will say to themselves, well, of course, there's not this bearded old man sitting on a cloud directing the show. That's not true. But what God really is the universe, or everything that exists, or whatever it is. There'll be that kind of magical thinking. I call it magical thinking because why call that God? If you want to say it's the universe, call it the universe. If you want to say it's everything, I'm going to have to remove Alfred from the meeting. Yes, you're gone, Alfred. I'm sorry. Alfred has left. So you will get people who will be sure that God exists, but they will have defined it as some reality principle, such as everything that exists. Now, what's wrong with calling that God? Very simple. If you call that God, you're going to have this entire background of everything that you have ever heard or thought about God and project that onto everything that exists. For example, since we were taught that God is benign and loves us, we will then begin to think that the universe is benign and loves us. I see no evidence for that at all. If the universe loves us, then what about all this blood and gore and suffering? What's that all about? Why would someone who, I love people. I would never cause them to suffer the way I see my friends suffering. And so apparently, if the universe is everything, the universe is not benign, or at least not benign on the level that we can conceive it. So I propose taking the word God out of our vocabulary entirely. It refers to nothing that we know nothing that we can know. And that would be the end of that particular magical thinking. Do you see what I mean, Sarah?
I've been working with children, secondary children who are high risk, very vulnerable, extremely violent children. And the other day, particularly, one of the boys who's only 10 years old came up to me and pulled onto my neck and gets extreme satisfaction from giving pain, right? But because this particular boy has been in about 13 foster homes, that's his way, that's his expression of love. For him, violence and interaction in this way is another form of love, and I feel it and I see it in him, and I see it with many of the children that I'm working with now. That's a form of love. It's what they come to know as love. So I kind of just, when I'm with these children, I'll just, breathe into that and just allow it to feel it, because they've never felt anything else. So.
Okay, but when you call that love, why not just call it making contact? That's their way of making contact. Because when I think of the word love, I have a completely different image in my mind, entirely different. For me, love is not just wanting to be in contact. If you define it that way, then a rapist is showing love. After all, to me, love is when you see another person or anything, an animal, even an idea, and you understand that you are not separate from that, and you want the best for that person or that other non-human creature. Or even if it's an institution, you want the university to prosper because you love that institution. Just wanting to come into contact, I would never call that love. But you may. I'm not debating.
Yeah, it's difficult, but to use the right words to communicate and express what I need to say, because as like the others on the panel in this meeting, when you're a teacher and you give names and labels and concepts to things, it's hard. Well, it was hard for me it still is to come away from that, to use the right terminology.
Yes, I wasn't finding fault with what you were saying. I hope you understand.
Oh, no. I'm from Liverpool. I've got thick skin.
Okay, I wonder if there are any other ideas about this in the panel. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I would like to say something. I was reading this part. I don't know if I should read it again, but it's about how to awake, basically. And I see myself in this magical thinking where I'm kind of, for example, I'm telling myself this story that I will awake someday, but not right now. But someday I will. But I'm not ready yet. Maybe I'm like too far behind or too messed up or whatever. So that's kind of like a deep belief that sometime it will happen, but not right now. And then there is this feeling of being guided my whole life. And I'm also wondering whether that is magical thinking. For example, like I imagine that I did not come here on my own accord. I could not have found you, Robert, and been invited to this meeting. It's kind of like something that just happened to me, and that to me is like a deeply it feels like it's like my whole way of thinking is like founded in that way somehow, that like the universe is kind of like guiding us. And my proof, in a sense, is this feeling of like I could not have found this place. I mean, like, how many people are there that talk about this stuff around? So what brought me here, if not like life? If life is not a guide, in a sense, So this is my magical thinking, and could you please comment on that, Robert?
Well, I would say that's magical thinking. Yes.
Yeah.
Actually.
But how do you break that? Did I come here by chance?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Right. We don't know that, do we? Isn't that
No.
part of the problem, Robert? Is for me, in my ordinary life, I don't use some of the vocabulary that you do or others in this group might, but the biggest problem I have with a lot of people is that they think that their opinions are facts.
Yeah.
That to me is the basis of magical thinking. They have a thought, and therefore that thought must be a fact. And I say, well, maybe your thought is correct, or maybe it's not correct. But just because you have a thought does not make it a fact. And that to me is a big part of this magical thinking. In other words, believing something to be real without really having any evidence that it is.
Say that again.
Believing something to be real without any evidence.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're being guided or not being guided. I remember in the first, quote, mystical school that I was in, this was a big part of it. Everybody, they called God the boss. And the boss was always helping them because they were better than ordinary people to become enlightened and save the earth. And it got to the point where if they found a parking place in San Francisco, they were sure that that was God's will that they found this parking place.
Yeah.
And all I could say is, you found a parking place.
How does that strike you, Danny?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just so deep, you know. It's just so deep because it evolves around this whole story about me and my life, and yeah, the whole story is magical thinking.
Aha, that's the point. See,
Yeah.
magical thinking arises because we really can't know very much at all about anything. And because there's a void there,
Yeah.
we become uncomfortable. To say, well, I'm just here and I have no idea why, how I got here, where any of this is headed, what happens when you die. I don't know anything about anything, which I think is a fact. It's a fact for me.
That's true, but I'm here now, and this feels like a good place in a sense, you know?
Yes, of course. And so
It feels like a start.
so it feels like a good place to me too. I feel grateful. I feel gratitude for being here, for having.
It's just hard to digest that it would be like totally random. I can buy the fact that I don't know. Drop that story, the mythological me who, you know, will get something in the end. I can drop that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
but it's hard to drop the fact that so many things happened in my life that helped me in a sense.
Well, I'm not saying it's totally random. I don't know that. I have no way of knowing that. But the logic that you're using, I don't think really leads anywhere. If you say, well, it's hard to imagine that I could be in this place without some kind of guidance or some kind of underlying intention, something like that.
Because there's no doer, but something did it, you know?
No, I wouldn't say that. I don't know
that.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying I'm not saying that there's no guidance. I don't know.
We don't know.
I'm saying that the mere fact that you exist and that you're subject to certain conditions does not suggest to me that somehow this is part of a cosmic plan or that you were guided here by some outside force.
No.
Let me go into a scientific aspect here just for a moment without getting too far into the weeds. There are a lot of people who want to prove the existence of God by saying there's certain physical laws, mathematical physical laws, and if those were changed by even a fraction of a %, life as we know it could not exist. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Yes.
Well, that's true, but that doesn't prove that someone made those laws. If life didn't exist, we wouldn't be here discussing this. So it just happens that we're here. It just could be that we're here because those physical laws are as they are. But it means nothing to say those must have been created so that we could be here. All we really know is we are here, and there's no explanation for it. Yes? At least I have no explanation for it.
Isn't intelligent design, or at least the theory of intelligent design, somehow based in that presumption
Yeah.
that this is so complicated and this and that it had to have been done sort of quote consciously unquote?
Yes, and there's a real flaw in that reasoning too. I don't want to get into the weeds on that one either, but the fact is that the people who say that it's so complex, how could this ever have arisen at random, do not understand the vast reaches of time over which this evolution happened, and that there could have been trillions, countless trillions of failures for this one success that we see. They just can't take that into account. You see, it just doesn't seem to compute, especially the ones who think that the Earth is 5,000 years old. That's the problem.
Can I ask you a personal question, Robert?
As long as it's not too personal, Danny.
Yeah, no, it's about this. Like, if you look back at your own story, so to say, like, you know, this happened and that happened and that happened. What's your perspective on that now?
If I look at my personal history.
Yeah, like you know, you ended up here. You're talking to us now, and do you not attach the story somehow to where you are at the moment?
Well, there's a way of doing that. There's a way of constructing a narrative out of one's past, and if you're one kind of writer, it would be kind of a factual history. This happened, and after I heard that from this person, I went over here and learned this other thing. That's one. Or if you're a kind of a fabulist, you'll create this fable, and you know.
That's it. That's what I'm doing. Like, you know, I had to meet this certain guru. I had to go to India in order to, you know, be ready to meet Robert or whatever, you know.
Well, you didn't have to go to India. I've never been to India, so right.
No.
I never had that desire. Never had.
I think what you're talking about, Danny, is that in the book about the hero's journey or the heroine's journey.
Yeah.
Because for me, I hear what you're saying. I've done India. I've done the whole traveling the world, and I detailed and documented it myself. But I do, Robert, feel that there is some, whether you want to call it a hero's journey or whatever, is that there is some sort of process that seems to be involved in unearthing or like going, instead of looking out for something to turn your, you know, your third eye, if you want to call it, in, and start looking within and start asking yourself questions, you know, on a deeper level. Who am I? And that's what I wanted to ask you to go move on to the next chapter is, do you believe that there is some sort of process involved, loosely?
You're asking me that?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
what I was saying to Danny is, I think in retrospect, you can trace a kind of history and see that it couldn't have been otherwise, because unless A, B, and C happened, X, Y, and Z could not have happened. That's one view of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really believe that this aliveness is leading anywhere. If that which is what I think you're really asking. Do I think there's something that's fulfilled in life by some kind of journey?
I think, yeah, that's what I'm asking, because I mean, right now, all I know is I'm going to take a sip of this tea. But in essence, with relation to what Danny was saying earlier, because I think that was a great question with reference to the you know, the hero's journey, is that when you jump on this, I'm going to do it with the inverted commas, when you jump on the path initially, if that seems to be predisposed for you, you do get caught up in this language and this terminology and this seeking of unearthing and uncovering and looking at all these shadows and everything else that goes along with it. And it does, initially, it does seem to, it does seem that you are in this kind of bubble, if you like. It's only when you step, this is why your book was so incredibly important to me, is that once I stepped off that illusion and came out of that bubble, then actually it took me a full year to reintegrate, because I was living somewhere, you know, up here, and now I live on the ground and I'm present with every moment as I see it and what was unfolding, how the play of things seems to all just to be like this.
And would you say that there was something that happened that made you fall out of the bubble in the first place?
Yes. Life went, here you go. And it was my father dying, then my mother, and then my brother committed suicide, and life kept showing me these things.
Yeah.
Love yourself, love yourself, love yourself. And I was like, no, I'm going to India. I'm going next to Dubai. No, I'm going to Thailand. I want to learn how to connect with my body and my emotions. Oh, I'm going to be a yoga teacher. And, you know, my poor ex-husband and children at the time, I thought, oh, what, she's gone crazy. Because I was actually looking for this thing called enlightenment. And people, gurus like Muji and others were like, you absorb this energy, you hear them, you hear the words on the screen, and then you're hooked in, and I'm like, you believe it because you're absorbing it. So it did. For 2 years I was in this, you know, looking at Buddhism, looking at Islam, seeking, find out all kinds of things, because I'm really curious about, I wanted to know about lots of many things, until I came off. And then I realised actually it was, you know, the spider in the web is free and trapped at the same time. Just so are we.
Well, there is this saying that, you know, awakening happened despite my efforts. I heard people saying that.
Yeah, it can come in any form, I believe.
Yeah.
You just be sat in the chair having a little nap and then wake up, and then can be completely different and start questioning things.
Yeah.
For me, it was because I'm stubborn. I feel like life gave me something really significant in the form of trauma and death to actually, how much do you love yourself?
I had the same thing. I was in India and I was a yoga teacher, and then I went and I lived with this Guru Muji, and then I went back home and I was living with my dad and mom and dad, and my dad was dying, and I saw the whole thing, and I could see that that is me in a few years, you know.
Yeah.
And that kind of like woke me up to the, you know, impermanence of this thing.
Yeah.
And it got me into a kind of a depression as well, because it was tough.
So I was saying to Robert earlier, it was like something, when it first landed in my hands, I was tentative. I was like, oh, do I really want to look at it? I was like, no, I like to be in this bubble, you know.
Yeah.
And
Same here.
Yeah, and I like to talk about Tantra, and I like to talk about awakening, and I like to believe that there's something out there that I can transcend to, but actually that's just fear. It's fear-based, because actually inside of me I was scared to look at actually what has been mirrored to you. What have you been like with your mum? What have you been like with your daughter? You know, can you go to those places inside of you? You know, your adopted mother, I've got 3 natural sisters. They were my natural thing, is how you pushed them away with jealousy, and how you were manipulative to your father because you wanted his attention, and all that stuff. I was like, I don't want to look at that.
Yeah.
So when I did start to look at it, that's when,
that's kind of my part of my magical thinking, that I feel very strongly that life pushes you to see those things. Like I had issues with my sister, for example, and I was forced by life to live with her, you know. I had no option.
Life does that. It's not God.
Yeah, it does feel like life does that.
Well, wait a minute. I'm having a little bit of trouble following this, in the sense that both of you now, Danny and Sarah, are using life as if life is some kind of a person or a influencer, and maybe not exactly God, but like karma or like intention, that that it's a guiding force, an entity that is a guiding force in your experience of life. You said life pushes me, life did this, life forced me. I mean, I'm trying to ask that as a question, and perhaps Robert might also have something to say about thinking about life as an entity, as an outside force pushing you in one direction or another, as a question.
Good question.
Yeah, let me comment on that. I think that's a really good point, Sterling. There isn't, in my experience, there is no such thing as life apart from this aliveness.
Yes.
And the aliveness is a self-expressive happening. It's not that we can split off life as some kind of program and that we're all involved in this and we're living out a program that's already been laid out and constructed. I think what happens is that the individual is born and is alive, and that aliveness expresses itself, not that it's being directed by some outward force. There's a natural wisdom to life that's part of what I call awakening. And that is that we see that there's something that repeats. And what repeats is birth, childhood, coming to maturity, old age and decline, and then our demise, our mortality. That's what we call impermanence, that this particular aliveness is only here for a brief time and will be replaced by some other aliveness that will then be doing just what Robert is doing now, thinking about these things, discussing them, maybe write a book or take some photographs, and that will be the deal. And I think that when we really see that there's nothing to arrive at except the grave, then we begin to understand what it really means to be alive, which means to participate in this moment and not to be concerned about where it's all headed. Where it's all headed is probably not the greatest thing in the world for the individual. It usually involves quite a bit of physical suffering and sadness and goodbye to all the things that I used to enjoy and the friends I've had. And the end of it is usually very sad for most of us. And if we really grasp that and don't imagine that there's this victory ahead, this is getting to your point, Sarah, about the hero's journey. See, I don't think there's any heroics involved here at all. I think it is what it is. And there's nothing really heroic about it. You didn't ask to be born. And now that you're here, you really have no choice. I mean, you could commit suicide, but otherwise you just have to be here. And I don't think there's anything really heroic about just being here. We just take it for what it is. And wisdom is to understand that it's not permanent. And all we have is this moment. All we have is this moment. And that's what I mean by, that's a big part of what I mean by being awake. To understand that this moment is what it is and can't be different. And it's only here for the briefest instant. And then we're on to the next moment, and that has to be the way it is. And there's nothing to make out of it. There's nothing to construct from this beyond the very being of this moment. It's hard to put this into words, but I wonder. Let me say hello to Martina. I see she's just arrived. Hi, Martina.
I'm sorry I'm late. I don't know what happened with the time.
Okay, well, but you're here. You're here now.
I'm here. I want to check to make sure that the speaker was working because last month it didn't work well. So are you hearing me okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I'm hearing you fine, Martina.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thanks. I'm really glad to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here.
Been really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like jumped in the middle here, so I don't know where you're at. I had a couple of things out of the book, but I'm willing to just ride along here.
Why don't you go ahead with that? Because we seem to be in a kind of a backwater here anyway. Could use.
Oh, really? Okay. So, oh, huh? Well, it comes from just the personal thing that I'm going through, because it is never ending, and it's always some just catch it. But here's two different chapters. One was chapter 18, and I believe the other was 20, chapter 20. They're kind of related. And I'll just read the phrase that is what's going on. Just this morning, something showed itself and seemed to fit in here. For months now, I've been a house finch that comes each morning and flies against the window, picking at her reflection in the glass. She sees the reflection and must believe. She flings herself at the glass and pecks at it over and over again. Of course, we'll never find resolution because what is reflected is real. This I see is what I do when I peck at my own reflection unmercifully as being not in.
Yeah, I'm not seeing you.
Is if you want, what I'd like to hear is just about this constant need. Are you seeing me? Because I don't have a screen.
Yes.
No, we can see.
Okay. This it's winding down, but I wonder if there's actually really an end to this picking at that reflection as if it were real. Like it comes from, I know where it comes from a very early age of not being enough. So I've done a lot of delving into that, which is like I'd like to be done with the delving into that. It's like the not enough is not real, but I don't get that yet. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Well, you may feel that from an early age you were never really loved. Now, I understand that's part of the story, but
Right.
But even if you got all the love in the world, you would still have this sense of I-ness or myselfness. We all have that, and that is what I consider an illusion, not a delusion, but an illusion of personhood or selfhood.
So how do you define the difference between illusion and delusion?
Yes, well, what's the difference between a delusion and an illusion? An illusion is what we see before us all the time. A delusion is when we imagine that what we're seeing is reality. We're not seeing reality. Everyone, we all really know that. We understand that the world that we see is constructed by our nervous system, and that a different kind of animal sees a different world. We really know that. If, for example, a bat lives in a world of high-frequency sounds, they're almost blind, but they can distinguish objects by the echoes of very high-frequency sound. They send them out and they receive the echoes back again, and they can fly around and avoid objects very easily, although they don't see them in the way that we do. So their perceptions of the world, they see one reality, one world, and their reality is a world of sound. Our reality is primarily a visual world. We know that there's something out there. We call it energy, but we don't really know what that means, but we use that word. And then our nervous system receives these impulses of energy and construct a world from them. And it's not only the world out there, there's also a world in here, by which I mean the liver and the kidneys and the stomach and the position of the bones and all these feelings of which we are unaware, but which constitute the feeling of I exist or myself. You see, all of this is going on constantly. And this is the illusion of being fixed, constant self. And you really can't talk yourself out of that. You can understand it, which is where I've gotten to with it. But it will still be there. It will still be there. For me, it's not delusional. And that's part of what I mean by being awake, because I'm very well aware that there's no such entity as Robert that really exists, but only this aliveness expressing itself in mysterious ways over which I have no control whatsoever. I think one of the reasons that the 10,000 Things works so well is that I didn't write it. I really did not write them. I had no idea what I was doing when I wrote those things. I more or less just typed it out. And I'm not trying to say that I channeled it. That's one of these magical thinking ideas, which that would mean that this book existed elsewhere, and it was somehow sent to me. And people like that idea because that gives it great credence. You know, oh well, you channeled it from Seth or some amazing entity. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, yes, it's funny, Danny, right? But except you've had that idea in your mind, and that's why you're laughing. Well,
I've been into all that stuff, yeah.
That's what I mean.
Just a second.
You see, we all have this sense, we have this illusion of selfness. And what I call awakening does not mean that the sense of I-ness goes away. Clearly, I have a sense that I, Robert, am speaking, except I know I'm really not. I know that it's just that speaking is happening here. And to call that Robert speaking splits something in half that really can't be divided. This aliveness speaks. Whether I speak or one of you speaks, it's aliveness speaking. It may have personal habits, and you had a story of being in love. That may come out in the content of your speech, but it doesn't have to. Speech could be about anything, really. And when we understand that and allow it, that's what I call freedom. See, I don't have to be right or wrong, and I'm not afraid to be ridiculous or absurd or just wrong. And as soon as we're in that place and understand that this is just self-expression, and it doesn't have to pass any tests or be evaluated or judged. It just can be what it is in this moment. Then we're just free. People seem to really love my photography. And I think one thing that makes it successful is I'm not really trying to do anything. I just walk through the world with my camera. Lots of echoes. And if I see something interesting, okay, I'm going to give up.
Robert, I have a question for you.
Okay, Sterling, shoot.
When you say you go out to photograph, and people, I mean, I like your work, you know that, and I know you like some of my work as well. My experience is that when I'm actually, I don't know, you want to say in the moment or awake, when I'm really awake photographing, it's one of the reasons I love photography is because it somehow or another it helps me be more in that moment that's flowing, is that what happens is that I'm not there anymore. So I don't really think about me or not me or anything. It's just there's this kind of process of seeing really something extremely beautiful, and then whatever goes through the motions, I click the picture, but I don't think about it much when it happens. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, exactly. I think we have the same experience with it, and that's why activities like that are so important, because they help. They're like a kind of teacher.
Yes.
Yes.
Can I just ask, please? Isn't that a form of meditation?
Might be, if you think of meditation of being present, in the sense that, let's say Tai Chi is a movement thing. Some people call it meditation, movement in meditation. It's not sitting there and contemplating or something, but you're so present that everything else kind of disappears, at least in my experience. And it happens for me quite a lot in very ordinary things. Waiting for the train, everything becomes quite beautiful, and in a way, I had some to talk about, Robert, about in terms about, in my view, the time itself or the perception of time changes when you are more awake. it kind of slows down because it gives you a bigger space in which to experience what's actually happening.
Mm.
So that at some point it actually starts to disappear. Because you're, and Robert talked before in some, I don't know, in his book or someplace, maybe one of his other things, about how when you really are awake, you're paying attention to so many things more at once. It becomes a really intense and beautiful experience without you thinking about you being there or anybody else being there or anything else. It's just, whoa, kind of thing, you know?
I'm totally with you on that. That's a nice an explanation and a beautiful onomatopoeia.
So
It's hard to find the word for it.
we haven't heard from either Richard or Neville, and I would really like to. So Richard, I'm inviting you now to jump in and comment or question, please.
All right, yeah, well, I had a whole topic here ready to go, but I found it interesting. Like Sarah asked, isn't like doing your art like a form of meditation? And maybe that word meditation is kind of like the word God these days, which is sort of, anything could be a meditation in a way. But what does that mean, and how is it helping us to use that word instead of just saying you're taking photos? Well, why are we using the word meditation instead of taking a photo?
Well, I had exactly that same thought. So you just expressed what I was thinking a moment ago. There's a practice.
Okay.
There's a practice of meditation, and there are techniques that one can follow to meditate, as it's called. You might watch the breath, or allow thoughts to arise without fixating on any of them. There are various techniques. That is not what I do when I'm out photographing. Not at all.
Yeah. Right.
When I'm out with the camera, I'm just carried away. I'm just carried away in the way that Sterling was saying, that you kind of disappear and there's just seeing. There's just seeing. Now, to get into that kind of condition is what people hope for when they are meditating, but it rarely happens because they know they're meditating. And then they say, well, am I doing this right? Maybe I'm not, or maybe if I do this for a year, I'll get good at it, and then I'll actually be a meditator, or whatever the story is. And what I've tried to express in the book is we need to get away from the idea of some kind of future attainment, because whenever we imagine that we're going to get better at something, we're in denial of the experience of this moment, which is all we ever really have. I might be dead tomorrow. I might be dead in 5 minutes. And I really know that. I really know it. And so I'm doing the best I can right now. I'm completely focused on this moment. And what I've tried to express as a kind of gift, I guess, is that's a beautiful condition to be in. It's freedom. It's absolute freedom, regardless of the fact that I'm going to suffer and die like any other animal. This is true. This is not theoretical. But apart from that, in this moment, I have absolute freedom. Absolute freedom. Here I am, here you are, and there's no impediment in this moment to my sitting here and speaking. In the next moment, there may be. In fact, I'm suffering from a serious ailment, and it's chronic. It's an autoimmunity. You may hear it in my voice. But in any case, although that is like maybe a sword hanging over my head, we all have that sword hanging over our heads. It's just that I know it. And in knowing that, but being willing to participate wholeheartedly in this moment, I am free. And I think that a lot of spirituality is misguided because people imagine that freedom necessitates arriving at some condition where you realize that you're one with God, and you've discovered non-duality, or whatever one of these shibboleths is. And all I'm trying to say is that's not it. It's here right now. It's here right now. That's my only message. See, we're all in the same boat. It's not like Robert is has attained something. I've attained nothing at all. I'm just seeing the situation of impermanence, and I don't know anything about non-duality. It's some kind of theory. You know, we're all one. Okay, great. Except you have a toothache. I don't have that toothache. So saying that we're all one doesn't really accomplish very much, in my view. And when we get into the more spiritual realms, like perfect masters and gods and all these other realms that people imagine are here, we're just taken away from this moment. And what I'm saying is, if we really see it, and you can see it very quickly, it's not a time-based thing. When you see that, that's the best you can get. It may not be perfect, but it's what you can really have. You can have that, or you can have a mind filled with ideas about what I must do and how I screwed it up last week. And you can be living with all of that, or you can actually be here. There's that echo again.
Thank you.
That was that applause, Martina?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, no, that you say it the clearest that I've heard it ever. It just breaks apart everything that we have ever believed, breaks apart everything we've ever tried. It just is so freaking simple that it's just overlooked.
Yes, it's too simple because people don't want simplicity. Because if when we have simplicity, then I'm not here anymore. See, that's what Sterling was talking about when he goes out with his camera. When he just sticks with the camera, he's not there anymore. There's just photography happening. And see, right now, this is what I'm saying. There's just talking happening. I have no idea what I'm going to say next. No idea. It's not planned out. And I'm not afraid to screw it up. See, that's where the freedom is. Because I know there is no screwing it up. It just is what it is. And nobody's really judging. Unless we judge our, see, let me say something about that. Most of us imagine that we are being judged by others all the time, but that's not true. People are thinking about themselves and their own situation. They're very, thank you, you're getting that, Martina. People are very rarely, you got it. I won't say more. Neville, could you jump in here?
It's like that if nobody's thinking about me.
Exactly.
Well, nobody's thinking about me. Oh my God.
Yes, that's it.
Then where am I and who am I if nobody's thinking about me?
Yes,
Oh my God.
Neville, I'd love to hear you say something all the way from us. We span a lot of time zones here, and you're on the other side of the date line, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's tomorrow morning. It's already tomorrow morning.
Yeah, well, we get the light first here, so we're really lucky.
It's Sunday there. Sunday morning?
Yeah.
You're ahead of all of us.
Sunday morning, yes. Yeah. Sunday morning.
The bringer of the light.
Yeah.
How come you're not in church, Neville?
Oh, yeah. I am in church. It's a wonderful church.
Good comeback, Neville.
Yeah, no, it's good to be here, Robert. I really don't have any questions for you at all, but what I'd like to share, if that's okay, is just a few feelings that that I have since reading the book, if I may. Well, just a bit of background. When in my teenage years, I was had some really strong experiences of just and they came totally out of the blue, of just everything dissolving and really becoming the energy of things around me. And as part of that, I couldn't make any sense of it, and that sent me on a whole journey of going to India. I was years in India, and like many of the readers that have shared, I got sucked into the whole spiritual entertainment and all of that, and spent years and years. And the few that have shared today on magical thinking, keep, even though I have these experiences, I still get sucked back into that magical thinking, and I forget that that this is all there is. And about a year or so ago, I came across your book, and I don't know whether other readers have this experience, but sometimes you read something that you're really intensely interested in, and you read the words, and there is just nothing happening. But the immediate thing with your book was just reading, and part of the thing when I had those experiences in my teenage years was that I really came to the conclusion that I needed to get to the bottom of this, and I couldn't, and I felt really strongly I need to get to the bottom of this, but without any cultural trappings. I need to be able to see how this is in my own backyard. And over the years, with various movements and teachers, I get glimmers of that. But and I thought at the time, I really have to find this. And if I can't find it without any cultural trappings, it's not worth a tin of fish. Well, your book was just one of those moments when I really the words. It wasn't one of those things where I read and nothing's speaking to me. The words were just falling off the page, and it was very accessible. And you were saying that same thing, just being this. There is only the now, this aliveness, and this moment. That so many of the other teachers were saying, but you were saying it from so many different angles. And so there was the first reading I read really rapidly, because it was just the joy of recognition in different ways. And now I'm reading it for a second time, and it's really slow and deliberate. It's really just sinking into the word, because it feels like a haiku reading, really. I want to find the seasons of the words, but I'm curious with this process, because I forget, and your book is a gold mine in the sense of remembering. And when there is that remembrance, there is just that lightening of being. There is just that, and that feeling is just the weight of having to know that there is nothing I need to know to abide in this moment, and that happens again and again. And this is with and it's like a really deep internal sigh of, oh God, and it takes away, and there's that light being that's so beautiful. But another thing that is beautiful also with your book that I find, and I'm finding, and it's been touched on with a few here today, is photographs too, because your words have that effect in a rational way, but it's the irrational. I've been fascinated. I've been an art teacher a teacher of art all of my life, or most of my life, and like you have shared, and like some have shared here today, I became disillusioned with the whole Emperor's New Clothes of the art world. And I'm really only interested these days, and you talked about it just a little bit before, Robert, with your photographs, is art where the intent of the maker is just really about the moment, and it's not sucking in the past or wanting to project into the future. It's just leaving it open and the leaving it open to the viewer to come to some conclusions or not. And so I'm fascinated with the there's a bit of echo coming through now. I'm fascinated with this process that your words do these wonderful things in a rational way, and then there is the irrational in art, and I really get that strong effect. And you said before about your intent is just to capture that moment without any other reference going on, and people can bring their references, and that happens in different ways with juxtaposition, or maybe it's just in some way perplexing. And so this is what's been going on as I've been reading that, but it's been coming back to the, how this remembrance and how that short-circuiting process, both with the rational in words, and it happens with the irrational in words. For instance, you put this poem about kindness on your website, and it's such a beautiful poem, but there are some words in there that are just a few combinations of words, and it's not even short-circuiting. It's like an explosion where the mind goes, throws its arms up in the air and goes, I give in, I surrender, because of all the words in this language. They put those few together, and that's just too much.
Sorry.
And that's just too much. And so I'm curious and I'm fascinated, and maybe you might make some sort of comment, Robert, about how this remembrance or this recognition occurs both in the rational and the irrational, with image and words. And I just want to say thank you for your book. It's wonderful.
Oh, you're most welcome, Neville. That's a great review. Great review of the book. Thank you so much. I don't really know what to say about how all this comes to be. It just seems to happen. I've been in this, I would call, awake or awakened perspective for a very long time now. I mean, this initial kind of shock to the system happened back in the 1980s. And I've kind of responded to being alive from that point of view, that I'm not doing this, all of it's just arising, and that I'm not even the witness of it because I can't stand apart from it either. So I'm neither in the witness position nor am I the doer of this. There's actually no name for this way of seeing. And it seems that whatever happens from that perspective, where I don't really, I mean, it's so hard to put this into words. I guess the book did pretty well, but I wish I could really say more. It's an unusual experience. I have no intention. It's just, it's like being in a current of some kind, you know, being in the ocean, and it's just moving around all the time, and one's aware of that. It might be an image, it might be a thought, it might be a feeling. I just don't have the feeling, I don't have the sensation of being the doer. I'm hearing some.
Oh my God, really? Me?
Can I ask you, please? Oh, sorry, Martina. I just jumping on, if you don't mind, just adding to what Robert was saying there. I'd just like to ask Robert, say as you're talking about the, you know, as things are just arising, when you're talking about self-realization, and in particular those who claim that they're able to teach it and deliver it as well, and you claim that it's an act of vanity. Can you just talk a little bit more about that for me, please?
I'll say something about the whole topic of spiritual teaching. There are some people who call themselves spiritual teachers. I'm just hearing this talking going on. It's distracting me. I don't know if you're all hearing that.
I hear it. I
You
have no
have
idea.
you have to mute your mic no matter who you are. It does not matter if you're part of the special chosen group. If the speaker is feeding back into the mic, you will get feedback and there will be an echo. Excuse me for jumping in, except I guess I'm a millennial, so this is my role to play right now. Please excuse me, but you do have to mute your mic, whoever you are, if you're not talking. Thank you.
That's what we need, a millennial to kick some butt, because I'm too old to do it.
I love that. Thank you. I'm turning mine off.
Yeah. Spiritual teaching can take different forms. There's one form of it which I think is really helpful. And Joan Tollefson comes to mind right away. She's a friend. We haven't been friends for long. She read my book last year and got in touch, and we became friends that way. And we've messaged back and forth a lot and did some video chat. What she is teaching is to be here without knowing. That kind of teaching is really good, in my opinion. It's helpful for people to hear, to be here. Self-realization is a kind of lie, because I don't really think there's a self to realize. I think what we realize is that what we call the self is what I was calling an illusion before. There's no self. There's a feeling or a sensation of being a self. But when we look into it, and I had this conversation with my friend Robert Hall. Dr. Robert Hall is a Buddhist teacher, a great person who's now dying. When we talked about this years ago, and he said, searching for self-realization is like peeling an onion. You take off one layer and there's still something there, and you want to get to the bottom of it. Well, you know this story. When you get to the center of the onion, there's nothing. The onion's been, all the layers have been peeled and there's nothing there. And that's my experience of the self. So when people say they realize the self, and then you ask them, what is that? They'll say it's Brahman, or it's God, or it's oneness, or it's non-duality, or all of this nonsense. But those things don't mean anything to me at all. I have no idea what God is. Non-duality to me is a meaningless term. I have no idea what that really means. If it means this is one vast universe, yeah, I can buy that. But what does that have to do with me and my sense of being? Nothing. I don't see how it connects. I mean, my sensation is like this. I wake up in the morning. I need to pee. While I'm peeing, I can remember some of my dreams. And gradually, I become less and less asleep and more in this world of sights and sounds, so that after 15 minutes or a half hour, or maybe when I've had a coffee, now I'm fully awake in this world. And there's a world of sights and sounds and all of this, but I never made it. I never constructed this world. I didn't put the trees and flowers out there. They're just there. I don't know what they are. Someone might say they don't exist, they're just consciousness. That's another one of these self-realization bits of nonsense. It's just all consciousness, as if that explains something. It doesn't, it explains nothing. So what? What does that mean? It's all consciousness. So, you know, I have no idea what that means. And so you have these teachers. I lit into one of them last week on the Facebook page because someone sent me this video of this guy going on in this nonsense way. And that's what they do. And they get paid big money for it too, which is part of the crime. Probably if they weren't being paid for it, they wouldn't be so eager to keep repeating the same old nonsense because, you know, there's no money in it. I'm not saying this guy's doing it for the money. I don't think he is. I think he's in the hypnotic trance and he really believes this. What the point here is that I have no idea what the self is or isn't. No idea at all. All I really know, if I'm honest, is this flow, this experience, which right now, as I'm looking at a screen, I see your faces there on top and I see a big picture of myself on the bottom. That's the view I've got here. And I have no idea what this is at all. Nothing, no concept. And that's why I'm such a harsh critic of spirituality, because it's really, it reminds me, I used to practice psychotherapy for many years. And in psychotherapy, what happens is, I hope I'm not ranting here. I always have the feeling of giving a talk or something, and I don't really like that.
That's good.
You know, you write a book and then you get to be the expert, and that's not really the intention. I hope you understand that. I feel really modest and humble at this moment, and I'm wondering why I'm talking. I'm melting down, as a matter of fact. What happens in psychotherapy is someone comes to your office and they start telling you where it hurts. My relationship with my husband is not really working out the way I hoped, and now we have a child, and you know, and okay. And then you, as the therapist, will discuss that with the person, and you'll try to illuminate the situation. And that's beautiful. What happens in the spiritual seeking is exactly the same thing. Someone comes to the satsang because they're in pain. If they weren't in pain, they wouldn't be at the satsang. They'd be at the beach or something, of course, or walking in the forest, or having a beer, or whatever it is. They'd be enjoying life. But they're not enjoying life. There's something wrong. There's something amiss. And so they go to see yogi so-and-so or whoever it is. With the idea is, if I follow this guy's instructions, I'll be like him, sitting on a stage with flowers and feeling wonderful, a big grin on my face, and it's all love, and isn't this, you know, okay. But it will be psychotherapy, because this guy is just giving them a way to feel better. What I'm saying is, I think you have to feel a lot worse if you want to be free, a lot worse. You have to see the desperation of the situation. The poem that Neville mentioned was so beautiful on that, because what it said is, until you have really lost and you see what losing really is, and you could be like that dead Indian by the side of the road, and that could be you. Until you see that, you have no idea what it means to be free. If you think being free means you get to sit on a stage with flowers grinning at everyone, got another thing coming. That's not what it is. What I say freedom is seeing impermanence and seeing that there's nothing to get to. There's nothing to realize. This is it. What you realize now is the only thing you're ever going to realize. In the next moment, I'm not saying the next moment won't be different. It will be different. But in that moment, you can either accept that moment or imagine that you'll realize something else in the future that will be better. And you have no reason to believe that. It might be a lot worse. The next moment could be a lot worse. You could be saying, I'm going to realize, self-realize. I'm going to meditate and self-realize. Next day, you feel this pain in your chest. You go to the doctor, and the doctor says, I'm sorry, you only have a week to live. Well, I hope you can get that self-realization done in a week. See, and it's really not like that. And until we realize that, these teachers will always be able to pull the wool over our eyes. And I'm not saying that they're bad people and that their intentions are bad. Some of them are, but most of them, I think, really believe what they're saying, because they're hypnotized. Their teacher hypnotized them. When you talk to these people, they'll have a lineage, see, and if you go back in the lineage and back, the lineage started somewhere long ago. Maybe it was Vedanta, and it started 2,500 years ago or something, and there was this truth given, and it just passed from teacher to teacher, and whatever that truth is, the present teacher is mouthing those words and really believes it. I think the thing that makes my offering in the book worthwhile is I'm not giving you anything to believe in that book. Nothing. There's nothing in it. I don't know if that's the experience you had when you read it, Neville, but I think there's nothing to cling to. It just calls the whole thing into question. And I think it scrubs the slate. And I think that's really beautiful, because when the slate is clean, that's when you get to experience this moment and write something on the slate for yourself that you actually see, and not what Swami so-and-so tells you you should see if you're awake. See, and I say that in this moment I feel awake, and I do. I really do. But I can't, it's not transferable. I can't take this feeling and teach you that, because that wouldn't be your awakeness. Your awakeness is going to be about you, not about Robert. See, we're only living one life, each one of us. I mean, it's limited. It's highly limited. And no matter what you get to, if you get to this freedom, it's still passing. You can't hang on to it, and you can't do anything with it. It's just my being here is just as sad as anyone else's. I often feel very sad, very sad. And I think that's one of the things that the spiritual teachers will not tell you. They won't tell you they sometimes feel very sad. I wonder if they do. Maybe they have lied to themselves enough so that they don't see the tragic nature of life. Maybe. But this life is very tragic if you really see it for what it is. If you're old enough to have lost good friends to death, you understand. It's a long goodbye. It's all disappearing. It's melting away. It's melting away. Like sugar in a cup of tea. You can't get the sugar back. And when my mom's still alive, she's 98, almost 99, and
Wow.
she's compos mentis. She's hasn't lost too much mentally at all, and she's lost everything. Her husband of 7 years is not here anymore. Her children are all out in the world doing what they do, and she's alone. Most of her friends are gone. A couple who are left are very ill, and they're very sad and tragic, and there's really nothing there. Nothing, except her being is there. That's what we all have to look forward to if we have longevity, which everybody seems to want. He really is. Okay, I've rattled on. I'm going to shut up now. And questions? Danny, I see you have a question.
Yeah, I want to ask you about what you're talking about. In your book, it says something about like appreciating the weather, and like the impermanence of the weather. But then I'm kind of like struggling with thoughts and feelings right now, where I wake up and I have the kind of like the same patterns of thoughts every day, because there's a lot of pain, and I'm like kind of struggling with my personal stuff. And I wrote you something about it. And in a way that is kind of like creating like an addictive personality where your thought patterns are always, you know, going to this escape, let's say. Like, say, for example, I play video games. So a lot of times during the day, I want to go and play video games, you know, to escape the pain that I'm feeling over life being so complicated. And that kind of like emphasizes the feeling that, you know, should I just see that as the weather? Because it all comes down to realizing that you're not the doer, right? And it's kind of hard when you're kind of like stuck in thought patterns every day, you know?
There's a truth that I keep referring to, which is impermanence and mortality, and the fact that life doesn't usually end in a pleasant way. That's a fact. It's not a lie. We can observe it anytime. You go to the old folks' home, you don't want to be there. You absolutely would not want to have a bed in that hotel, right? We all know this. Can't lie. You just know this. There's really 4 basic ways of dealing with it. The first one is denial. It's isolation. You just put it out of your mind. No, okay. That's obvious. You just ignore that. Ignore it. Another one is what you call, I'm referring now in my own mind to a Norwegian philosopher, 20th century philosopher called Peter Zapffe. Let me go back. Can you stand to hear this? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay. Once again, I'm uncomfortable giving a talk, but I think Peter Zapffe is worth it. What he talked about is what happens in evolution when you have a runaway evolution. Now, what that is, it works like this. There was, in say, a species of ancient deer, the males who had the bigger antlers were selected sexually. The females would mate with them more often than the ones with the small antlers, because the ones with the big antlers could use the antler as a weapon, beat off the smaller ones, and they'd end up with the females. And so increasingly larger antlers were selected for in this species of deer. And as the generations progressed, the antlers got bigger and bigger. It's kind of like giraffe's neck is the same thing. But at some point, the antlers got so big that they interfered with the lives of these animals. And eventually that species died out because the antlers were just too big to really make it on the physical level. That's a runaway development. Well, Zapffe said the same thing is true of the human mind, that human intelligence evolved. At a certain point, according to Zapffe, we reached this stage of intelligence where we realized mortality, and we understood it and wanted an answer to it. Except we're smart enough to know that we're going to die, but we're not smart enough to know what that means. We're not smart enough to figure out anything about it. And so we deal with that terror of mortality, as he called it, in 4 basic ways. One is we deny it. Another one is what he called anchoring, which I find very interesting. What he meant by anchoring was you unite yourself with something that is more permanent. It could be religion, it could be family, it could be patriotism, something that's likely to outlive me. I connect myself with that, and that helps me to deal with the fear of mortality. A third one is distraction, and that's the one you mentioned, Danny. You just, if I begin to worry, I play a video game, that'll take care of it. Okay.
Yeah, part of that is as well that I have control over that world. I don't have control. Well, I feel like, I can do certain things and I'm going to get rewarded for it, while life just seems chaotic and difficult for me at the moment.
Well,
So
that's another good point. I like to play backgammon myself. That's a form of distraction, which I enjoy. And I have no control when I roll the dice. It could be any number, but once the number comes up, I have total control of the board. I just move the pieces
That's
wherever.
it.
And
I
that,
love that as well. There's like RNG, so to say, but you kind of like have space within that RNG to make wise decisions.
okay. And you know, this is normal. There's nothing pathological about any of this. I want to underscore that. So then there's distraction. And the fourth one is what he calls sublimation. And that is when you throw yourself into some artistic pursuit or something like that, where you're using your creative powers, as they're called, and supposedly that gives meaning to life and takes away the terror of mortality. Or someone might say to me, Robert, your book is going to outlive you. And they're right. There'll be people reading this book when Robert is, 6 feet under. But so what? What does that do for me today? Nothing. That thought doesn't really do anything.
I could add one more thing because it's kind of funny. Someone told me that I should start meditating or I would never wake up. And that's when I, totally gave up on that thing and just went full power into video games instead.
Well, when people recommend meditation, I wouldn't write that off exactly. I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there's a time for that kind of practice. Maybe not for everyone, but I have known people who benefited from it. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
It's not a bad idea to sit quietly for a few minutes and observe the flow of thoughts and feelings, because you may understand that you're not controlling that. And to have that experience, gee, I'm not the doer. I think that kind of does help you to wake up. I think they jump the shark, though, the meditation people, when they say this is a method for awakening. No, it isn't, because I know plenty of people who are long-term meditators and they're just hypnotized, self-hypnotized by meditation. So you have to be careful. But I wouldn't.
Yeah, I didn't like the dogma of saying that is the only way. Like, how do you know that?
Oh, you know what? I've known some people besides myself whom I consider awake. And none of the people I know whom I consider awake would ever say something like that. They would never talk that way, tell you what to do, and that's the only way. In fact, the people I know who are awake have no idea how that happened. I include myself in that. This is just something that happened. It just happened. Well, I was just doing my usual thing. I remember when it happened. I was sitting on the Taos, New Mexico in my pickup truck outside of town, parked at the Rio Grande Gorge, just overlooking the gorge. And I looked out and I was having all these thoughts and feelings. And quite suddenly it came to me that I wasn't making these thoughts and feelings. I hadn't decided on anything. They were just occurring. And I just realized I'm not doing this. This is happening. See, maybe that's a form of meditation, to realize that, yes, you see, you don't have to sit there on a cushion in somebody's ashram to meditate. Meditation, as I understand that, is just the process of becoming aware of thoughts and feelings without judging them. And you could do that while you're taking a shit in the morning. I mean,
but hearing you talk about it, I just felt right now actually that I'm gonna start meditating, in a sense, like, just sit for 5 minutes or whatever, just to breathe and actually be present in my
you see, my son, I have given you the next practice.
Because at the time being, I'm actually living in the countryside here, and it's like I'm doing gardening and picking cherries and stuff, and it's very, very refreshing. Like, just being in nature, it's so meditative.
Yeah, well, okay. So what I'm saying is, you don't have to swear off the video games. I like to watch idiotic romantic comedies in the evening. It's very relaxing, and I laugh. Laughter is very important for me. But so I'm not telling you don't play video games. What I'm saying is, take a few moments every now and then to become aware of the flow. See, there's a constant flow. There's a constant flow, see? And the situation of someone like me is just that I'm aware of it. I don't forget it. And I know that I'm not making it. I know that I'm not responsible for it, but I also know that I'm not apart from it. I'm not the observer of it either. This is people get into trouble by creating this identity called I'm the observer. No, you aren't. You have no idea what you are, and you never will. No one will. If you don't know it now, I don't know it. If you don't know it now, I have no idea what this is, how it got here, where it's going. It's just thoughts and feelings, emotions and perceptions, and it just keeps flowing. And when I meet other people who are older and more experienced than I am, and I ask them what's going on for you, they'll tell me it hurts here and there, or I have an appointment tomorrow, and that's life. That's it. See, and what I'm getting at is, don't imagine that you're going to get something in the future or that this leads anywhere. It doesn't. It's the same thing. It's always the same thing. Somehow you have the feeling I'm here, and that may be painful, may be pleasurable. And the freedom of it is that whatever arises, you accept it. Just allow it, because you know that it can't be different. And if you happen, let me just finish this thought, you happen to see yourself playing a video game, okay. It's no big deal. Whether you play that game or not, you still have to be here.
Yeah. I tried going cold turkey and I deleted everything, and then I started, I had a few months of doing something else. I was in Spain when I heard about you.
There's worse
and then I went back into it.
There's worse addictions than video games. It could be drugs and alcohol, and then you'd be poisoning your body at the same time.
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that actually for me, it's all, I really feel what you're saying, and I feel like it's helping a lot. But there is this, there is this thing where I don't see you anymore. Something happened here.
I see you.
There is this, okay.
I see you.
Good, until you kind of think that, well, I'm not awake and Robert is awake, and that whole state of mind that there is something that will actually, there is a certain whatever, that whole thing is
well, Danny, I'm not going to lie to you. That may be true. Yeah. That may be true. Maybe it isn't. I'm not sitting here in judgment of your state of mind.
I heard other teachers saying that they see everyone as awake. That's mindfuck as well.
I do say that everyone is awake, except for many of us, that awakeness is hidden by an agenda. Well, and that's what I see in you. See, you look at someone like me, and maybe 2 years ago, you look at someone like me, and maybe 2 years ago it was Muji.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is just projecting your own awareness onto this other person. And see, that is what has to stop. You have to realize that all you have is you. You can't have Robert. You can't. And whatever I may be or not, you can't ever have that outside. But what you have to do is find your thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, when I say you're awake right now, I really mean that. Awakening is what's hearing these words and without effort, making them into sense. That's awakeness. What else could it be?
No, of course.
Yeah, well, you say of course, but then just accept that. This is my awakeness. This is what awakeness is, the ability to see and hear and think effortlessly.
So in a way, I have to drop this story about, I'm reading your book, and I feel that there's pages where you kind of say that awakening never ends, but also that, it's something that occurs.
You always take it to this thing of what I have to do. You don't have to do anything. Yeah. This is it.
Okay.
Whatever you are now, this is Danny awake. There isn't any other Danny awake. This is it.
It's not a better version.
In the next moment will be something else, but it's not something that you don't have to do anything to get to the next moment. That's automatic. It's a
Okay.
flow. It's just a flow. It's not leading anywhere except to the grave. But beyond that, there's nothing to realize.
There was something in that. You don't have to do anything to get to the next moment. I get that.
Well, what else is there to get? We're all in it. We're all in the same boat. See, I say that. I say that we're all in the same boat, and I really mean it. I'm not above you. I don't know something that you don't know. I just see myself I see myself nakedly. It's a big nothing burger. I mean, it's just a happening. It's not, there's no force here. There's no accomplishment. And that's what's wrong with this self-realization. See, as soon as you say that, then there's something that has to be realized, and it's the self, and it's not what I am now. It's out there somewhere. And as soon as you start thinking like that, that's an endless highway.
Exactly. There's this, what do I have to do to get that?
You aren't going to get that. You're going to get you. And you have that.
Yeah.
But you just have to be content with it. I don't know how I can be more emphatic. This is it. No matter how many times I say that, everyone will say, oh no, that's too simple. You mean this is it? Yeah, this is it. I think that people resist that idea because it's disappointing.
Yeah, it's like, this sucks.
This is all there is. I get to wake up in the morning, I'm speaking personally, I get to wake up in the morning with a headache. That's it. There's no way out of this.
Exactly.
No, there isn't.
Yeah.
This is it. I woke up with a headache. That's it. That's my physical condition, chronic. Well, okay. See, that's what I mean by awake. You just take it.
Yeah.
You don't try to make the next thing out of it. You just take it. The next thing is going to be death.
Yeah.
So that while this aliveness is happening, be this aliveness. Not this pain-ridden, scared person that has to awaken, but this vast aliveness that can hear and think and feel and look at the beauty of the universe. See, it's definitely possible. This is a beautiful world. I think one of the things that I like to express in photography is how beautiful this world is. A human face. Oh my God, if you really see that for what it is, it's beautiful. And that's what we're missing when we get into spirituality, which tells you that this ordinary vision isn't good enough. You have to find God or self-realization or whatever. And I think that's a ripoff. And I don't want you to be ripped off. I want you to be Danny.
I'd like to add something there, if you don't mind, Robert. I don't want to jump in though, because mid-flow, is that all right? Just to add something?
Yeah, but before you do, I just want to comment on something, please, Sarah, if you'll forbear.
Of course I will.
This always seems to end up, and I'm a little embarrassed by it. I'm not a guru. I'm not a spiritual teacher. That's not my function. I'm trying to clear this mess away, not to tell you what to do next, except it's the limitation of this situation where one person asks a question and someone seems to have the answer, but I don't have the answer. All I'm telling you is I don't have the answer. You have the answer. You have the answer right now, not in the future. And I don't want to be confused with some kind of teacher. I'm not. I'm an ordinary person, just like you are. I have the same problems you have. I'm not living in my parents' back room. I mean, so our problems are not quite the same, but they're the same. And the problem is that I can't get a grip on any of this. This is flowing through my fingers like water. And even if I wanted to keep this, I can't. I can't keep my beautiful wife I love. I can't keep my donkeys. I can't keep my cameras in my home. They're all going to be taken away from me. I can't keep my health. Some of it has already been taken away, and there's no way to go back. The arrow of time only points in one direction. And that's what I'm trying to get you to see. There's nothing to become. This is it. And see, that's so simple, but people resist it. The feeling is, this is it? This fucked up mess is all I get? Yeah, that's it. As soon as, see, it's like turning a key in a lock. As soon as you turn the key, or Rumi, I think this was Rumi. I don't really like Rumi that much, but some of it's okay. Rumi says, I banged and banged on this door, bang, 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 trying to get inside. And then suddenly I realized I was on the inside. That's what I'm saying. You're banging on a door hoping to get out, but this is, you are out. This is it. This is life. You're alive. Whether you play a video game, whether you play a video game or masturbate all afternoon, that's life. It's the same thing, really.
And there's nothing to figure out, in a sense.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, there's nothing to figure out. Yeah. Just live. It's a very short time. And if you keep on thinking there's something to figure out, two bad things can happen and nothing good. Either you'll figure something out. That's the worst thing that can happen. That's what I call self-hypnosis. You figured it out. Yes, I've got it now. I've figured, now I'll teach it to you. See, that's the worst thing that can happen. The other bad thing that can happen is you get old and you look back and say, why did I spend my life doing that?
Yeah.
Oh, I really regret that. I could have been walking in the park enjoying the flowers, and instead I was going like this. What do I see? That's all I'm telling you. And when I say these things, I want you to understand something, Danny. I'm not speaking as some kind of perfect master. I'm speaking as someone with a misspent life who happened to snap out of it at a certain point. Before then, I was on a big ego trip and I was involved in all kinds of weird shit.
But you were searching for enlightenment, in a sense.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. Don't waste this. It goes away so quickly. Don't waste it. Don't waste it on spirituality. Forget about it. Live. And everything that you need to know will become apparent in this moment. Not because some teacher taught it to you. That's nonsense. They have nothing to teach. They have their opinions. They have what they think works for them. That's all. There's no experts in the art of living. We're all a bunch of damn fools. All of us. Okay, I asked you to forbear, Sarah, and you did, and now what do you have to say?
From my experience, is that I was very much, I feel now a very different person to what I used to be, okay, 3 years ago. I feel as though I've turned my own light switch on 360 degrees and got rid of all those onion layers and then found in the middle, nothing there, okay? So I hear fully what you're saying about that, about just being and the aliveness, just and allowing it to arise. But for me, the yogic path was a very important part of my hero's journey, because that truth that I was finding was actually an opportunity for me to learn how to sit. And I'm not, initially, I did sit under a tree and with the mudra and think, oh, you know, I'm going to be enlightened and things like that, a little bit like Danny. But it did take me a long while to realize actually I'd been living in my head for a long time over, and I wasn't living from my heart, okay, or from the intelligence of my gut. I didn't realize that the three communicated with each other, and on a scientific level, that how the body actually is highly intelligent and speaks its own language if you can listen and are quiet and still enough to hear its messages. And so for me, that's been an important part of my journey. And for instance, if I'm here in the Northwest in England, if I went to the doctors to complain about, you know, a pain in my heart, chest pains or whatnot, the doctor could examine a physical heart. Yeah, actually, how do you explain the esoteric? How do you explain about Kundalini? Like, I'll call it Kundalini energy because that's a concept and a term that I know, and I had a lot of personal experiences of these crazy physical manifestation symptoms that actually occurred to me, and I thought I was going insane, and felt that though they were actually real and this aliveness was coming through my body, so much so that I had to leave my husband because I didn't want to get sectioned or locked up because it was real. Yet in the East, and this is in the West, okay, but yet in the East, if you talk about, you know, you have any symptoms about, you know, you don't feel connected or grounded, the doctor will ask you, oh, what's your root chakra like in the, you know, in the East. So it's kind of what I feel like a little what I'm pinned with is that the East is meeting the West, and that's probably where, like Danny and others out there who are listening in now, is once you step on that yogic path, how do you rein it in, not take it too far, and to realise that in its simplicity, what it's actually showing you. Does that make sense?
Well, I would avoid the term Kundalini because it's a technical term that probably refers to nothing. And so as soon as you say it, you have aroused an entire philosophy that may have nothing to do with anything. We all have feelings, and some of them are mysterious, let's say. But it's, in my view, it's better not to call them anything. And just say, this is how I feel. I feel energetic today. I feel that there's energy arising from my gut. I feel it radiating outward, but that doesn't necessarily mean something. It's just that part of this aliveness.
Well, if you were in India and you fancied to be a snake man for the afternoon, you would quite, you know, you could walk down the street and you could see somebody wreathing around and you know, acting out as a snake. If you did that in the UK, you'd be kind of taken away to the nut house because it's not seemed appropriate. We pigeonhole and stereotype the beliefs and concepts, and we're not allowed to express ourselves fully and truly how we want to be often.
Yeah, that I understand that, but the same is true in the East. The idea that somehow people in India know more about humanity than people in England is that's a canard. I don't believe that for an instant.
Maybe it's just demographically where I'm from here in the Northwest. It feels like many people live in the head from their own conditioning and ancestrally. Yeah, when from my traveling ventures, a whole new world opened up to me, and I was rather like taken aback really with the different cultures and the different belief systems, and the allowing. I found it more alive and allowing in how you wanted to be.
Well, it's always good to get out of your own culture and go somewhere else, because that throws your cultural limitations into relief, and then you can see what you can see the burden you've been carrying around. There's no question of that. I mean, I left the US 30 years ago. I'm down here now in Mexico, and it's very different here. And most of the Martina has lived down here a lot. Also, it's very different, and it does change your feelings and your mind to be in another culture that has different aspects to it. But I wouldn't say this culture is better than the US culture. It's just different. There's some things about it that are better and some things about it that aren't as good. Look, this has been going on for a long time. I'm getting tired. I wonder if there's any last thoughts. Can we just go around and hear from everyone one more time? Martina, why don't you?
Hopefully you can hear me. I wanted to pop back just a moment to the intention that was you spoke the word about intention, that you didn't have intention, and I just want to let you know that that got delivered in a way that is clearing something, but it also like clears the whole board. Because if I look at my still lingering desires for or to intend something, that's the way I've been raised, to intend and to move forward. But if that intention drops away, it's like, oh my God, I got the sense of freedom. The sense of no intention. It's like the flow then is there and you just observe, or you're part of that flow. So I just wanted to go back to that because I thought it was one way to really clear the mental chatter, to observe the mind and how it always is setting up. If I intend to do something and that's sold for big mega bucks nowadays on all the podcasts and everything, just intend. All we have to do is intend. And then we will have the car and the new partner and the la-da-la-da.
That's nonsense.
That's so the idea that you propose, that you sharing yourself is what I'm trying to say. You sharing yourself and being outside of the intention was liberating for me.
Oh, thank you. I want to clarify something. In ordinary life, you may need to have intention. Like Danny might say to himself, I really need to get out of this situation. I should go out and look for work. I'm not saying you should say this, Danny. It's just an example. That would be an intention. And you try to follow through on that. That's ordinary intention. It's probably necessary in the material world. But that's not what I mean by intention. I think you understood that. What I mean by intention is, in speaking this way in this group, I don't intend to try to help anybody or help anybody wake up or produce some corresponding state in you or anything like that. I have no such intention. This is just what you call self-expression. I wrote this book. It seems like a good idea to discuss the book, and that's what we're doing. But I don't think that's going to lead anywhere. I think the best shot, really, that anybody can have to access what I'm getting at here is to read the book, not to hear me talk about it. I see I'm willing to do that because I'll tell you, really, I mostly do this because I have a lot of followers on YouTube and they like this kind of thing. And some of them aren't readers, but if they get curious, maybe they'll read the book, and that would be really great. Yeah. So
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Martina, thanks so much for showing up. I don't know if the others know this, but you're really one of the people who's responsible for getting me out in public at all. And I remember standing in this parking lot talking to you on the phone, and you were trying to talk me into writing something, and I kept saying no.
And I kept at you, yeah. I had no idea, of course, because I was drowning, trying to find somebody who's actually speaking that I could speak with. I mean, so it was perfect for me. And then, of course, you killed the Buddha, so you have to be careful what you start.
I'm glad to see you looking so well, too. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's better and better all the time. And I have my pains.
Well, who else would like to give a parting shot?
Thank you, Robert. I would like to thank you, Robert. It was an interesting, enjoyable evening, and I wish you well.
Thank you, Sterling, and be well in Switzerland. That's a nice place to live nowadays, I think.
It's one of the few civilized places left, I think. So I feel very grateful to be here and be able to speak out against some of the idiocy that seems to be going on. And so we're very fortunate. We've had good weather. The garden is progressing well, and our government is not yet as insane as some others.
Okay, my friend. We'll be in
Thank you very
touch.
much.
I'll be in touch. Thank you all. Nice to meet you, other Sarah,
Thank
Danny,
you. Thank you.
Martina.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Neville, how
I'd
about
like
you?
to-
Parting words?
I'd like to thank you too, Robert. Well, just for holding this space. It's been wonderful. I've watched most of your Zoom sessions, and it's been another aspect of the book that I've loved. And to thank you once again for your book. It really is worth a tin of fish and probably a lot more.
Thank you so much, Neville. Thank you for being here. Anything further?
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much for sharing, everybody.
you.
There's some great questions raised, lots to just feel into. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Danny, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Robert, and sorry for taking up so much space, I feel.
Not at all.
Oh, no.
Thanks.
Take up all
Thank
the
you.
space you need.
With that, I bid you all farewell.